Kevin Costner was born in 1955, but his story doesn't start with fame or fortune. It starts with a quiet house in Lynwood, California, and a tragedy that changed the course of his family's life forever. Before Kevin ever took his first breath, his parents were already living with the grief of losing a child. In 1953, 2 years before Kevin was born, his older brother Mark Douglas Costner died just 1 day after birth. That pain never really left the household. From the very beginning, Kevin was surrounded by silence, not just the quiet of a small home, but the kind of silence that holds pain. His father, William Bill Costner, worked as a ditch digger who eventually became a powerline technician. His mother, Sharon Rae, was a social worker who carried the weight of other people's problems and still came home to cook, clean, and try to smile. But the air in that house was heavy. Grief never screamed in the Costner home. It whispered through long pauses, tired glances, and unspoken memories. Kevin learned early on how to listen to what wasn't being said. As Kevin grew, he watched his parents work endlessly. His father came home each day with clothes that smelled like metal and oil. His hands were rough and scarred. His mother often stared into empty corners of the kitchen, quiet and distant, remembering the baby she never got to raise. Their love for Kevin and his surviving brother wasn't soft or loud. It was guarded, protective, and firm. That kind of love shapes a kid. It teaches you to be tough without saying a word. By the time Kevin was 12, he had already packed and unpacked more times than most adults. The Costners moved frequently, chasing better jobs and cheaper rent. Cities like Compton, Ventura, Visalia, and Orange County became temporary homes, never permanent ones. Kevin learned not to get attached. Each goodbye felt like practice for the next one. The constant moving made him quiet, reflective, and often invisible. He wasn't the class clown or the star athlete. He was the kid who sat in the back, writing poems instead of talking. But even in that quiet, something stronger was forming. Kevin began to build an inner world, one where he could imagine a life that didn't constantly disappear, one where stability wasn't just a wish. He found meaning in music, often singing in church choirs, and began writing more. He didn't dream of fame yet, just of standing still, of finding something that lasted. He watched his father fix broken things around the house and saw how strength could be quiet. His mother's tired but steady care showed him how love could survive anything. Then came the moment that would start everything. Kevin graduated from high school and enrolled at California State University, Fullerton, where he earned a degree in marketing and finance. On paper, it was a safe future, the kind his parents wanted, but inside, he felt trapped. He took a regular job, wore a shirt and tie, and went through the motions, but every day felt like something was dying inside him. He didn't belong in cubicles or among spreadsheets. His mind was somewhere else, imagining something bigger. Fate didn't knock, it sat down next to him. On a flight back from his honeymoon in Mexico in 1978, Kevin found himself seated next to legendary actor Richard Burton. Nervous and unsure, Kevin told Burton that he wanted to act but didn't know if he could make it. Burton looked him over and said something that stuck forever. "You have green eyes, I have green eyes, I think you'll be fine." When the flight landed, Burton's limo was waiting on the tarmac. Before getting in, he looked back at Kevin and said 2 simple words: "Good luck." That was all Kevin needed. Within weeks, he quit his job and packed a small suitcase. There was no big announcement, no plan, just a belief that maybe he could do something more. That decision would lead to years of struggle, but also to the beginnings of something extraordinary. The reality of chasing a dream rarely matches the fantasy. For Kevin Costner, the moment he left behind his stable job, he stepped straight into a storm. He had no acting experience, no industry connections, and barely enough money to pay for gas. He drove his old Datsun toward Los Angeles with nothing but hope in the passenger seat. The glamour people imagined about Hollywood was nowhere to be found. What Kevin found instead were long nights, cold apartments, and a silence even louder than the one he'd grown up with. At first, he picked up odd jobs to survive. He scrubbed boats, he delivered packages, he even gave bus tours of celebrity homes while wondering if anyone would ever live in one of his. Some nights the heat in his apartment didn't work. He'd sleep fully clothed, whispering to himself, "Just one more day." And he meant it. He wasn't chasing fame anymore, he was chasing survival. He didn't call home. Not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't stand the idea of hearing disappointment in his parents' voices. Pride kept the phone silent, but rejection kept coming anyway. He knocked on casting doors that didn't open. He handed out headshots that were tossed aside. Some days he skipped meals to save enough for bus fare. And still, he kept going. His first on-camera role didn't feel like a breakthrough. It felt like humiliation. In the early 1980s, he landed a part in a low-budget film called Sizzle Beach, USA. It was awkward, cheaply made, and released years after it was filmed. Kevin hated it. He once said he wished he could buy every copy and burn it. The experience didn't open doors, it nearly closed them. He kept auditioning, kept being ignored. Then came another blow. He was cast in The Big Chill, 1983, a film by director Lawrence Kasdan, but every scene featuring him was cut before release. His name didn't even appear in the credits. Kevin went to the premiere anyway, watching from the sidelines as if he didn't exist. That moment could have ended his career, but it didn't. Instead, he went back to class. Kevin studied acting with whatever money he could scrape together. He learned how to turn rejection into resilience, how to make pain part of the performance. "Dreams don't open doors," he once said. "They just give you the strength to keep knocking." And eventually, someone answered. In 1985, the same director who once cut his scenes gave him a second chance. Lawrence Kasdan called Kevin back, not for a bit part, but for a major role in Silverado. This time, the camera didn't look away. It captured something electric. Kevin didn't act like someone grateful to be there. He acted like someone who had waited his whole life to be seen. The film became a modest hit, but for Kevin it was more than a paycheck. It was the start of everything. The world had no idea what was coming next. In just 2 years, Kevin landed the lead role in The Untouchables, 1987, opposite Sean Connery and Robert De Niro. He played Elliot Ness, a man of quiet strength and moral clarity. The film made over $100 million, but more importantly, it gave Kevin something he'd never had before: respect. Then came the roles that would define a generation. In Bull Durham, 1988, he was the charming yet grounded baseball veteran. In Field of Dreams, 1989, he was the everyman chasing a whisper from the cornfield. When he stood there saying, "If you build it, he will come," audiences didn't just hear a line, they felt a promise. Kevin wasn't pretending to believe in dreams, he was living proof that they could come true. By 1990, Kevin Costner wasn't just a star, he was in charge. He had formed his own production company, TIG Productions, and was ready to take a massive risk that no studio believed in. The idea, a nearly 3-hour western called Dances with Wolves, with long silences, dialogue in the Lakota language, and a story centered around Native Americans. Executives called it career suicide. But Kevin didn't flinch. He mortgaged his own money, took the director's chair and pushed forward. The production was a nightmare. Storms wrecked sets. Budgets exploded. Crew members quit. Kevin spent nights freezing in trailers, wondering if he had ruined everything he'd built. People told him to cut the silences. He refused. "That's where the truth lives," he said. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about telling a story the right way, even if it cost him everything. When the film was finally released in 1990, it wasn't just a success. It was historic. Dances with Wolves made over $400 million and won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. A man who had once slept fully clothed in a cold apartment now stood on the Oscar stage, holding gold. But even then, Kevin admitted, "I didn't trust myself." The applause was loud, but it didn't erase the years of being ignored. That was the height. And as with many stories in Hollywood, the fall wasn't far behind. In the early 1990s, Kevin took on bigger and riskier projects. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, 1991, was a box office success, earning over $390 million, but critics mocked his accent. Then came JFK, 1991, directed by Oliver Stone, a bold political film that tested Kevin's courage as both an actor and a public figure. He stood by it, even as headlines called him reckless. "Any discussion of what could be true," he said, "can only make us freer." In 1992, he teamed up with Whitney Houston in The Bodyguard. He waited a full year for her to accept the role, and even gave up a $10 million salary in exchange for a cut of the profits. It was a gamble, but one that paid off. The movie earned over $400 million, and the soundtrack, led by Houston's iconic song "I Will Always Love You," became the best-selling movie soundtrack of all time. Kevin's share? Over $20 million. It was more than money. It was vindication. He believed in her when no one else did. But success came with a cost. Kevin was now working non-stop, acting, directing, producing. Friends said he barely slept. He ran sets during the day and edited films by night. "Success can be lonelier than failure," he later admitted. The pressure never stopped. Then came the movie that nearly sank him. Waterworld, 1995, was supposed to be his next big hit. Instead, it became one of Hollywood's most infamous disasters. Hurricanes destroyed sets. The budget skyrocketed to $235 million. Kevin nearly drowned while filming a scene tied to a mast. Critics pounced. The press dubbed it Kevin's Gate, comparing it to the biggest flop in Hollywood history. The wounds weren't just professional, they were personal. Then came The Postman, 1997, a film Kevin directed and starred in. It bombed even harder, sweeping the Razzie Awards for Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. Just a few years after winning an Oscar, Kevin was being laughed off the stage. The same hands that once held Hollywood's biggest prize were now holding unpaid bills. But here's the difference with Kevin. He didn't walk away. He went back to work. Smaller movies, simpler stories. He returned to westerns, the genre that first gave him a voice. He wasn't chasing hits anymore. He was chasing something real. "I've never been afraid of beginning again," he once said. And that may be the most important part of his story. Because while others ran from failure, Kevin Costner faced it. He didn't hide, he didn't complain, he just kept moving. While his career weathered its own storms, Kevin's personal life was quietly falling apart behind the scenes. Back in 1975, long before the fame, he had met Cindy Silver while attending California State University, Fullerton. She was kind, grounded, and believed in him before anyone else did. In 1978, the two got married, full of hope and nothing else, not even a proper ring. They moved into a tiny house with hand-me-down furniture and big dreams. She worked multiple jobs while Kevin chased auditions, often returning home defeated. But Cindy kept telling him, "Don't quit." Their love grew into a family. Annie was born in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988. Kevin once said he cried every time he held one of his children for the first time. These were the golden years, barbecues in the backyard, family pictures under California sunshine, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they had made it. But success has a strange way of eating the very thing that feeds it. As Kevin's career exploded, he spent more and more time away. The Oscars, the premieres, the shoots across the world, they all looked glamorous, but they came at a cost. Cindy stayed home, raising 3 kids alone while reading about her husband in magazines she didn't subscribe to. She smiled in family photos, but the distance was growing. They tried to hold on. Kevin took breaks from filming. They went to marriage counselling. They even escaped to cabins to try to remember who they used to be. But the damage had already begun. Rumours of late nights and on-set flirtations followed Kevin. Nothing was confirmed, but sometimes doubt doesn't need proof. It just needs time. Then, in 1994, after 16 years of marriage, they filed for divorce. The split wasn't just emotional, it was financial. There was no prenup. Cindy's legal team reportedly sought $160 million, not out of greed, but out of heartbreak. They eventually settled at around $80 million, one of the most expensive celebrity divorces of the time. Cindy got the family home and custody of the children. Kevin got his production company and the quiet pain of being a part-time father. In an interview, Kevin once said, "You're going to see your kids half as much as you used to, and no one tells you how much that's going to hurt." The night they signed the papers, they shared one final dinner. No yelling, no insults, just silence. At one point, they both reached for the same glass of water. then froze, realizing muscle memory was the only thing left holding them together. The divorce changed him. He threw himself into work, not out of ambition, but out of escape. Each role became a distraction, but even the loudest film set couldn't quiet the sound of 3 kids laughing in a home that no longer belonged to him. 2 years later, life threw him another curve. In 1996, Kevin met Bridget Rooney, a woman known for her family's ownership of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their relationship wasn't loud or long, but it was meaningful. Bridget got pregnant, and while there was brief uncertainty, a DNA test confirmed Kevin was the father. That's when he made a promise: "I won't let him grow up wondering if he matters." Their son, Liam, was born later that year. Kevin set up a trust fund, provided full support, and showed up, not as a star, but as a dad. The relationship between Kevin and Bridget didn't last, but there was no courtroom drama, no scandal. Just 2 adults who went their separate ways with mutual respect. In that moment, Kevin learned something important. Not all consequences are punishments. Some are quiet blessings wrapped in responsibility. And in Liam, he found a chance to do things differently, to be present, even if the world wasn't watching. Kevin Costner thought the worst was behind him. After years of rebuilding both personally and professionally, he found himself drawn to a quiet, graceful woman named Christine Baumgartner. She was 20 years younger, a former model and handbag designer, and the calm to his storm. They met in 1998, just a few years after his divorce from Cindy and the birth of Liam. At first, it seemed like a fleeting connection. In 2002, they even broke up briefly. Christine wanted kids, and Kevin wasn't sure he could start over again. But love has a way of circling back. He couldn't let her go. "I couldn't lose her over that," he later said. So, when they reunited, and eventually married on September 25th, 2004, the wedding wasn't just beautiful, it felt like a second chance. They exchanged vows at Kevin's 160-acre Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, Colorado, surrounded by horses, pine trees, and the sound of mountain wind. Christine arrived in a horse-drawn carriage. Kevin, usually stoic, had tears in his eyes. "I didn't think I'd get this chance again," he whispered to a friend. Together, they built something that looked unbreakable. They had 3 children: Caden Wyatt in 2007, Hayes Logan in 2009, and Grace Avery in 2010. Kevin slowed his career to spend more time at home. He built snow forts with the kids in Aspen winters and ran barefoot with them across Santa Barbara beaches in the summer. Movie nights, bedtime stories, and barbecues by the lake became his real rewards. "This," he once said, "is what I was running toward all along." But even dream lives come with cracks. By the early 2020s, things started to shift. Kevin's projects demanded more of his time. Yellowstone, the wildly successful series where he played John Dutton, had him filming for months. Then came his passion project, Horizon, an American saga, a multi-part western he funded mostly out of pocket. It consumed his focus, his finances, and slowly, his peace. Christine was left to manage the household. Friends later said she still set the dinner table for 5, even on nights when Kevin didn't come home. She reportedly told someone, "I miss the simple things, coffee, breakfast, a day with no schedule." She wanted his presence. He offered stability, but love without attention slowly erodes into something quieter, something lonely. Then came the moment that shattered everything. In May 2023, Christine filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Kevin was on set when he received the papers. Crew members said he froze mid-scene, script pages still in hand. "It felt," he later admitted, "like the ground came out from under me." The separation wasn't just emotional, it was public and brutal. Christine's legal team initially requested $248,000 per month in child support. The court later reduced it to $63,000, but by then, the headlines had already turned it into a spectacle. Under the prenup, Christine had to vacate their Santa Barbara home, the same house where their kids had taken their first steps, played in the yard, and grown up surrounded by photos, memories, and laughter. But the deepest cut came just weeks later. Paparazzi caught photos of Christine walking along the beach with a man named Josh Connor, someone Kevin had once considered a friend. It wasn't proof of anything, but to Kevin, it was enough. "I didn't want this," he told someone close. "I still love her, but some things you can't unsee." This time, the loss wasn't just financial, it was emotional. He had already lost half his wealth in his first divorce. Now, he said quietly, I lost half my heart. His youngest children were suddenly splitting time between houses. Their laughter now echoed in 2 homes instead of 1. And Kevin, the man who once played the bodyguard, found himself completely unguarded. Even through heartbreak, Kevin never stopped working. He kept showing up on set, even as his personal life unraveled behind him. While his marriage with Christine was dissolving, he was deep in production on Horizon, an American saga, a decades-long dream finally coming to life. He wasn't just directing, he was acting, financing and rewriting scenes between takes. Friends said he looked exhausted, walking the desert set in Utah with shoulders heavy from more than just the role. This wasn't about chasing hits anymore. Kevin had mortgaged his home and invested $38 million of his own money into Horizon. Studios thought it was too long, too quiet, and too expensive. Kevin did it anyway. If it fails, he told someone, it fails with my name on it. It wasn't about pleasing anyone, it was about finishing what he started. When the first chapter premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2024, critics were divided. Some said it was brilliant, others thought it was too slow. Kevin listened politely, then smiled. He wasn't chasing praise, he was keeping a promise, to himself, to the land, and to the stories that never left him. The film made just $38.7 million, barely matching his personal investment. But he didn't flinch. For Kevin, profit was never the point, integrity was. Behind the scenes, the weight kept piling on. His children were adjusting to a new life, 2 homes, split holidays, and the absence of a routine they once knew. Kevin, for all his Hollywood power, couldn't stop that. Some losses, he said, teach you what triumph never could. And through it all, another wound stayed open, one that never fully healed. The death of Whitney Houston in 2012 had struck Kevin harder than anyone realised. They had formed a rare and quiet friendship while filming The Bodyguard. Kevin had championed her from the beginning. She was nervous about acting. Executives didn't want her in the role, but Kevin stood firm. If she says yes, I'll wait as long as it takes. And he did, for a year. On set, he became more than her co-star. He helped her find her rhythm. He told jokes when she was nervous and encouraged her when she doubted herself. She was scared, he said once, but she was magic. They talked about faith, family, and the burden of being perfect in front of the world. She called him my safe place. He called her the miracle I got to protect. When Whitney passed away at 48, Kevin was gutted. He was alone when he got the call. "Are you sure?" was all he could say. At her funeral, he was asked to speak. He stood in front of the world and said what only a true friend could. "You weren't just good enough, you were great." And then came the line that made the entire room freeze. "And I will always love you." Kevin rarely speaks about her now, but friends say when her song comes on the radio, he quietly changes the station, not from denial, but out of respect. "It's like leaving a room where someone you love is still sleeping," he once said. That loss changed something in him, not just how he viewed fame, but how he viewed people. He became more guarded, more focused on his kids, and more private. It wasn't about building a bigger career anymore, it was about finding peace and holding on to it. Pain doesn't always show up as drama. Sometimes it's just silence. In the years that followed Whitney's passing and the slow breakdown of his marriage, Kevin felt that silence more than ever. Not just the kind you hear, but the kind that settles deep inside. He once said, "Fame had once filled me. Now it just echoes." The headlines were still there, but the phone didn't ring as often. The awards still shined on the shelf, but the house felt empty. That silence grew louder when he lost both his parents, one after the other. His mother, Sharon Rae, passed away first. Kevin was on set, chasing deadlines, chasing perfection, the very dream she had always encouraged. He got the call and froze. "She's gone," someone whispered. Kevin didn't move. He stood still, script in hand, heart somewhere else entirely. He hadn't made it home in time. He never got to hold her hand or hear her final words. At her funeral, he stood next to his brothers and tried to be brave. "She carried other people's pain," he said. "Maybe too much." But the grief didn't fade. It doubled. Just 2 years later, his father Bill passed too. Kevin got the news in a hotel room. same stillness, same disbelief. It felt like the world lost its balance. "It's the curse of distance," he would later say. "You chase the dream to make them proud, and when it finally happens, they're gone." Those losses marked a shift. Kevin started choosing roles with more meaning and less noise, movies about fathers and sons, about regret and redemption. Films like Open Range, 2003, were smaller, quieter, but they carried something deeper. He wasn't trying to win anymore, he was trying to remember. Still, his body carried the weight of all those years. People saw the cowboy, the sheriff, the bodyguard. They didn't see the knees wrapped in tape, or the hands that trembled in the cold. On Waterworld, he was burned by the sun and nearly drowned. On Open Range, a horse threw him and cracked his rib. During Hidden Figures, he battled kidney stones but refused to miss a day of filming. "Maybe the anger in that scene came from a real place," he joked. At 70, the wear and tear is permanent. His shoulders ache, his back stiffens, cold weather bites harder. But Kevin doesn't complain. "Pain," he said, "is just proof that I'm still alive doing what I love." He wakes up before dawn, still feeding horses at his Aspen ranch, still writing between takes. Some crew members say he works harder than actors half his age. He's slower now, sure, but more focused. Every step has purpose. There's a scene that says it all. Kevin, standing alone at sunset, his hands resting on a fence rail, watching the horses graze as golden light falls over the mountains. Behind him is a lifetime of storms. Before him, another horizon. "Maybe I've slowed down," he once said, "but I haven't stopped." And that's the truth of Kevin Costner. He doesn't pretend to be invincible, he just keeps going. Kevin Costner's legacy doesn't live in box office records. It lives in the lives he's quietly shaped. He's the father of 7 children: Annie, Lily, Joe, Liam, Caden, Hayes, and Grace. Each from different chapters of his life, but all tied by the same thread. A father who never stopped showing up, even when life pulled him in opposite directions. Annie, born in 1984, followed closest in his footsteps. She runs her own production company and focuses on telling real stories, just like her dad. Lily, born in 1986, has a soft voice and a talent for music. She's performed at charity events and sometimes sings with her father, quietly seated in the back of the crowd. Proud but out of the spotlight. Joe, born in 1988, also found his place in film, working behind the scenes in sound and production, crafting stories rather than chasing stardom. Then there's Liam, the son Kevin had with Bridget Rooney in 1996. Liam has stayed out of the public eye, growing up with privacy and peace. But those close to Kevin say their bond has only deepened with time. They don't need to talk about legacy. They live it in the quiet understanding between a father and his son. And the youngest 3, Caden, Hayes, and Grace, still carry the glow of childhood. Caden is into music and video editing. Hayes, who already appeared briefly in Horizon, rides horses and shares his dad's love for the outdoors. Grace, the youngest, is described as fierce, funny, and protective of her father. When they visit Kevin at his ranch in Aspen or his estate in Santa Barbara, it's not about luxury. It's about laughter, movies, and old home videos flickering on the screen. This is the life Kevin built, not for Hollywood, but for them. His Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, valued at nearly $250 million, stretches across 160 acres of Colorado beauty. It's where Kevin finds peace. The property has 3 residences, a private lake, a baseball field, and trails winding through pine forests. It's not just real estate, it's memory frozen in time. The house in Santa Barbara, perched above the Pacific, is filled with books, fireplaces, and views that make the world feel still. There's even a 1,000-bottle wine cellar, each label telling a story of a year survived. His cars aren't trophies, they're chapters. A 1968 Shelby GT 350H, a Land Rover covered in dust from old film sets, a Tundra he drives to feed horses, an Audi S8 for quiet drives along Highway 1. Even a vintage boat sits in the harbour, waiting for the days when the ocean feels gentler than the city. But none of it defines him. What does is what he gives. Kevin has poured millions into causes that matter: Parkinson's research, women's shelters, children's hospitals, and relief for first responders. He's hosted charity events at his home, auctioned off stays at his ranch, and quietly written checks when no one asked. Money isn't success, he once said. It's a tool, and tools are meant to build. He still wakes before dawn. He still rewrites scenes on set. He still listens more than he speaks. At 70, there is no new romance, no scandal, just a man who's learned how to live with the silence. He doesn't need headlines anymore. He has horses to feed, kids to raise, and a story still unfolding. The final chapter isn't about fame, it's about endurance. Kevin Costner once said, "Family isn't a chapter, it's the whole book," and he's still writing his, one line at a time, one morning at a time, one child's laughter at a time. He may be worn, he may be tired, but he's never been more alive. When people look at Kevin Costner's life, they often see the movies, but they miss the message. They remember Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, Field of Dreams, and Yellowstone, but they might forget that each of those stories came from real places in his heart: loss, loneliness, family, faith, forgiveness. He wasn't just playing those roles, he was living through them. Kevin's story is a reminder of what success really costs. Yes, he made over $250 million, won Academy Awards, and became a Hollywood icon. But he also sat alone in empty trailers, signed 2 heartbreaking divorce papers, and missed his mother's final phone call while filming a scene that would never mean as much. He built ranches, yes, but he also packed boxes labelled family and memories on nights when his life fell apart. He gave the world unforgettable performances, but couldn't always keep his home together. That's the truth of it. You can have talent, money, and fame, and still lose the things that matter most. And yet Kevin never became bitter, even after betrayal, even after loss, even after Hollywood turned cold. He just kept moving forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes quietly, but always with purpose. When his knees started aching, he didn't quit. He wrapped them. When critics turned on him, he didn't argue. He directed his own stories. When love failed, he didn't stop loving. He just became more present as a father. That's not weakness. That's strength most people never show. Today, at 70, Kevin Costner is more than an actor. He's a builder, a survivor, a witness to how fragile and beautiful life can be. He once said, "The only legacy I need is to know my kids are proud of me." That says everything. Not the money, not the fame, just the look in his children's eyes that says, "You showed up, you tried, you didn't quit." That's what makes Kevin's story matter. It's not tragic because he failed. It's tragic because he lost so much along the way. And it's inspiring because, despite it all, he never stopped believing in second chances, in love, in stories, in himself. Not every man can build empires and still return home to feed horses in the snow, but Kevin Costner can.